I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Marriage is the Best. Today we're going to be jumping into the topic of blame and blame's impact on marriage. So blame is a deeply destructive force that creates distance in the relationship by carving an emotional chasm between the two spouses or parties. If left unresolved or unchecked, blame can create bitterness and lead to resentment. Blame corrupts our lens for our partners and distorts it into something false. And blame shifts one away from assuming positive intent in marriage. It shifts us away from the lens or the orientation that says, my spouse is well-meaning, my spouse is well-intentioned toward me, which eats and kind of corrodes your ability to be connected. Because if you're not assuming, that your partner is well-meaning or well-intentioned, then it's pretty difficult to connect to them. So blame creates a culture in our marriages that is destructive and is kind of the pulls us in the opposite direction of creating sustainability in our systems and creating connection and intimacy. So in practice, when a couple comes in and I'm seeing kind of a cycle of blame, the alarm bells kind of start going off. The red flags start a waving, and if left unchecked in the counseling environment, blame can be really destructive to the individuals in the marriage, as opposed to helping them to be a healthier system for one another. It can create a place where people are able to just throw their blame at each other instead of looking inward. They can look outward. They can start lobbing all of the things that are hurtful that they're carrying at their spouse, and again that process of blaming and hurting can really undermine the whole counseling process. So it's really important to be cautious when you're seeing a lot of blame in a marriage relationship that's first come into the office, because it can do a lot more harm than good. I think the longer that I worked with couples, the more that I've come to understand that if you're stuck in a blame cycle and you refuse to work on it, or you don't seem to be able to shake this cycle from your psyche, from the lens, to shake your psyche from the lens, to shake the blame from the lens that you're using for your spouse, that greatly increases the risk for failure in the counseling process. Successful marriage counseling exists in a pretty small window. You kind of have to hit the couple at a certain time. And there are some dynamics like blame that limit your ability to reach them, to teach them, to make a difference, to make a difference in their lives and to train them to make a difference in their system. The couple kind of has to fit into that window in order to maximize their chances of finding success. Oftentimes when I see like really deep-rooted blame in the system, I'll kind of test the waters for a few sessions to see, how deep do those roots go? And if I'm finding that they are stubborn, long standing, long-term roots that go down quite deep and are very, very tentative toward, wanting to shift the focus and shift the lens, then I will often encourage the couple to seek individual counseling rather than continue with couples work. Just because the risks of continuing to engage in couples work when blame is a deep-rooted part of the system tends to cause a lot more harm than good. And for their time, honestly, it can really waste. I've felt in the past like I've wasted couples' time while working on something that was so stuck in that blame that there was no way that I was going to help them to move out of that, and releasing them or shifting their focus from each other in couples counseling to the individual in individual counseling can help them to start to, it does create a less of a platform for the blame, because the individual counseling is supposed to be focused on the person in the room. So taking out that other person and creating an environment that's a reflection of the individual and their blame that they're carrying and their own struggles, and giving them support can help them to eventually come to a place where couples counseling might be a possibility in the future, but only really when that blame system has been updated in some form. I've seen people stop couples work and do their own individual work, and I've seen it really be a beautiful thing when the other person is not in the room and they're able to just reflect on themselves, and they have to contend with themselves. They have to talk about themselves. They have to, have another third party hear their thoughts about their spouse and their thoughts about life and how they relate to others, and maybe, their friendships or their family and how that impacts them. I've seen that work in really beautiful ways in sharpening and creating a healthier person, which then eventually creates a healthier marriage. So it's not that the marriage wouldn't be touched by the individual work. It obviously will be, or could be. I've seen that work really positively. But because of how blame kind of corrupts an individual's lens, they can also really struggle to hear that couples counseling is not a good option at this time. I can remember sitting in session and doing this really poorly, where I had let an individual know that this wasn't going to be a good fit. The couples counseling wasn't going to be a good fit. And that it was my opinion that they actually needed to seek individual counseling instead. And it went really poorly. They weren't able to hear the heart behind what I was saying because of the blame in the lens and how that had kind of corrupted their view of the relationship. In some senses, blame can create a sense of self-righteousness in the relationship. I am right and you are wrong. And that, really undermines the process of couples counseling. So once someone can get some individual counseling, and that can definitely open the door for marriage counseling. On another occasion, I remember sitting with a couple and pointing out the blame in the system and being met with kind of a shock and anger, and being told, that they didn't agree, and that essentially it was their partner's fault. The blame was just kind of out on the table. It was their partner's fault that the marriage was like that they were like that. And I had attempted to build enough of a relationship with them that I could put that on the table in this specific case. And it didn't work. It just didn't go well. I wanted to say, oh man, like if you choose this lens or, this way of telling your story, it kind of sucks the air out of the room. there's no blaze, there's no fire that's going to start. There's no positive changes that you're really hoping for, that you're seeking through the counseling. There's not that possibility. There's not that hope, because the blame kind of puts your partner in a perspective of like they're the enemy, and that undermines the whole process, and it undermines the relationship. So yeah, it really does. Blame distorts your lens, shifts your orientation away from really seeing your spouse. And when you start to see your spouse as poorly intentioned toward you, it can be very difficult to shake that belief. It can be really difficult to shake that, lens out of the system. Early on in our relationship, Becca and I struggled with a lot of things, based on the stress of life and all the things that we had going on. And if you want to hear more about that, you can definitely listen to the first year. I think that's episode 4. But in that context, if you listen to that context, I think that you could see that there was so much stress and so much room for making each other the enemy. And I think that my defensiveness, when Becca would bring something to me, often made it more difficult for us to connect. So early on, I struggled when Becca would tell me that I had done something wrong. That's a great opportunity for defensiveness and blame, because then I can kind of protect myself and fend off the perceived attack. I can say, oh, well, I only did that, or it only sounded like this because of, your hearing, or, well, no, it didn't, I didn't mean that. So why do you get to feel that way? All those really helpful marriage strategies. And I can still struggle at times with hearing criticism, especially when tired and stressed, and that can lead to some poor responses or some defensiveness. But looking back over the course of our marriage, I have to say we definitely have improved our dialogue around difficult conversations, which has helped a lot. We've entered into those conversations willingly. We've entered into those conversations attempting to hear from one another. We entered into those conversations committed to working them out. I heard a great quote this weekend, actually, that, if you're in your marriage and the other person says that they're not feeling heard, then you kind of need to immediately stop the process. Because if your spouse or partner is not being heard, like if you're not hearing or understanding where they're coming from, then your ability to move forward, to communicate and connect, to be married, is at risk. And it's risky to move on without really hearing the other person, and understanding where they're coming from. I really liked that. I like the idea that if someone, especially in the course of a hard conversation, is saying, "Hey, I'm not feeling heard," or you I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying, then we stop. We stop and we hear what this other person is saying. At least I thought that was a great idea and a great model for how to kind of move through those difficult conversations. But anyway, so our dialogue around difficult conversations has definitely improved over time. And then I think that alongside that, our trust levels have grown a lot. Early on, we had lots of reasons not to trust one another because we got married very quickly and had lots of stress and difficulty in that season. But our trust levels have definitely gone up a lot. And that's helped us then to respond less defensively, use less blame, and to thirdly, create a deeper connection. So all three of those that have created barriers to blaming. So we are less likely to blame when we're having hard conversations, when our trust is really high, and when we're feeling connected. It kind of creates an insulation from a blaming dynamic. Now we just blame the government for all our problems. So, obviously one way to kind of create that connection and trust and to, work through those conversations is to take 20 minutes to be really intentional about communicating with your spouse every day. That's something that I believe really strongly in. And as I see couples kind of lean into that, I see them having a lot of success. I see them changing their culture in their relationship. I see them discovering new things about themselves as individuals. I see them feeling more connected, more on the same team. And it's really beautiful. You know, just recently I was able to sit with a couple that kind of graduated from some of the marriage work in order to look at some more, individual supports, because their primary thing that they've been coming in for has been marriage, and the marriage is going a lot better, and they're starting to understand their marriage themselves, and they're starting to put some things into practice that are making them feel much more connected and heard and understood. And so I was able to kind of celebrate that with them and encourage them to keep doing some of their own individual work in order to then improve the marriage that way, right? By just becoming healthier people. And that was really exciting. But some of that had to do with them taking the time to do a little bit more communication. And, it doesn't take 7 days a week. Just starting where you are and increasing that over time is fantastic. You'll definitely thank yourself later for starting that practice. So marriages are much less likely to blame if they are having the hard conversations, learning to trust each other, and feeling connected. If you have any questions about blame, or you finding lots of blame in your system, I know that Gottman has written some great articles on blame. I'm sure that you could find them on the Gottman website. That's John and Julie Gottman. They're fantastic, and they provide lots of great resources. I know that Stosny has written about blame and in some of his individual works. Maybe I could link some of those in the description as well. But yeah, learning about learning to be insightful and aware of your own blame patterns is a great kind of screening tool that will not only improve your health as an individual, but also the health of your marriage. And it would definitely be something good to kind of dig into, is where am I struggling with some blame? How is blame touching my internal world, the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions that I'm experiencing toward my spouse? I think looking at that and screening it, and maybe getting some wisdom from a mentor or someone who really understands you, working through some of that with a counselor, but really not allowing blame to root down, not allowing the blame to get deep to the point of destroying some of the fondness and the connection in your marriage. We received an email, and so this is the part of the show that we're going to read an email. And if you would like your email read on this show, you should email me at marriageisthebest@yahoo.com, because it is, and Yahoo is an old school email. So send me an email. If you have insight, if you have a question, if you have a thought on any of the episodes. Beck and I are probably going to be recording year 2 coming up, and that will be really fun. But we were thinking about answering questions about year 1. So if you have any questions about year 1, shoot those our way so that we can kind of tag those at the end of our year 2 podcast. And yeah, so here's that email. It says, "Hi, Peter and Becca. I have enjoyed listening to your podcast since you first shared it. It has been a launching point for conversations between me and my spouse. The one on your first year of marriage has opened doors of communication between us, and I really appreciated this. It has been fun looking back over the years at who we were, where we came from, and what we brought into our relationship. Things we never really thought about, let alone had conversations on. So thank you both for your willingness to be bold and brave in a loving manner in sharing about your experiences. Your example is helping couples to be bold and brave in their conversations." So I thought that was really sweet, really encouraging, and I hope that this podcast does that same thing for you. So thanks for listening, and have a good one. Bye.